The CW Chronicles. Sinners. Written by Silvano Williams. All content copyright 2013-2023. All rights reserved. Chapter 3. Heroes on a Mission. In the vastness of space, life is scarce, random, and almost impossible to sustain. In space, pits of darkness appear crushing, absorbing the bright heavenly bodies into unforgiving spans of emptiness and solitude. For the short-sighted, the void of space can seem like a barrier of shadows and doubt, working to keep life away, stopping the chance of evolving the conscious mind. However, the reality is that the mind is never out of sight from itself. Between every radiant star, every living planet or its moons, there is never enough darkness. There is never enough emptiness to keep the light and the hope for evidence of the mind out of sight. Space, even with its empty and hollow darkness, serves as the conduit of light, reminding every living creature that looks up to the skies and sees the galaxies and stars spanning in the faraway universes that life is out there. Such is the strength of the mind's aspiration. It drives life to break limitations and expand its horizons by using a distinct fuel, an energy source that stimulates the desires for discovery, disregarding the extreme percentage of the chance for failure. It is a phenomenal fuel, well known in human history and throughout all the dimensions, embodied in tales of deities and supernatural entities with fantastic stories to explain it. Many cultures share the name of this fuel with us. We call it hope. Those that don't refer to it as idiocy.
Vlad,
Ilona said sternly, pulling me out of the trance I was in. I was laying on the floor, curled up in a ball in the fetal position. I started trembling from the cold. The dim cell lights created a halo around her wavy auburn hair, which seemed extremely bright compared to the darkness I had just felt.
why are you shivering? Are you okay?
She stood from her chair and reached inside.
Come here. Grab my hand.
I winced at the sound of her voice, feeling like I had a hangover. I'm fine, Ilona, I assured her, even though I felt nauseous. The simple act of seeing her there had already begun to warm me up. I reached up to her and gently touched the palm of her hand. I took a deep breath. Don't worry about me,
But it's my job to take care of you.
she said, her bright green eyes lit up with sympathy and concern. I couldn't help but notice that she was the only one who could make the Dimension police uniform look good. In contrast to her, the outfit was almost drab. Its fabric was a tight-fitting glossy gray mesh accented by a design of blue and lavender lines that ran across the chest in the form of an inverted V. The colored lines also ran down the side of the pants, which had pockets down the legs. I had never been too fond of the uniform, so I never wore it unless forced. The truth is, before all of this, I never felt like I belonged here with the Dimension Police. In my opinion, they were too passive, even if compassionate. Hell, most of them weren't even soldiers. It reminded me of the Red Cross back on Earth. They worked behind the scenes while I was a mental blitzkrieg.
What did you feel? Why were you so cold?
Ilona called my attention back. I felt what Villain felt. Or rather, I felt nothing good in me. I sat up from the floor and leaned against the wall, pushing aside my criticisms of the DP. I felt as if I had been dropped into the vacuum of space to slowly suffocate by his malice.
Why don't you get something to warm you up?
The Dimension Police did have amazing technology, though, I'll give them that. Even in the prisoner cells, they had replicating machines that pretty much let you eat anything you wanted. I remembered the last time I had a coffee in my hand. I never got to drink it. After 2 weeks, it seemed right to try to enjoy another. Standing up and stretching out toward the ceiling, I realized that no matter how comfortable or well-fed I could be, I was still a prisoner.
Vlad, don't worry. I will not leave you alone.
Ilona said, perhaps seeing the emotions on my face. She was the only comfort I had left, even if I could tell she was observing me by the numbers. I knew she was diagnosing me. The coffee cup was a welcome warmth. It's been 2 weeks, Ilona, I said, trying to distract her. I can't deny I deserve the punishment, but I'm more useful to the DP out there, finding clues to defeat Villain. And helping CW.
But you are finding clues here, love.
I gritted my teeth. Not in anger, but to keep from crying out. I couldn't digest Ilona's use of that word. Knowing she loved me disarmed me, and at that moment I felt empty and broken. Don't, Ilona. Please.
They can't keep us apart, Vlad. Don't be afraid of that,
she said with unwavering certainty. I didn't believe it. But they can. You can't be my therapist if we appear to be emotionally attached. Doesn't that violate some sort of medical ethics or something?
On Earth? Sure. Here. Maybe. Things have changed.
Ilona seemed hesitant to tell me more, but then she continued.
There are far more important things than our feelings right now. We all need you, Vlad. No one has a choice in the matter.
Weird, I said pensively.
What's weird?
That we no longer have a choice. Isn't that what we fought for? Isn't that why the Dimension Police were created?
Was it?
Ilona countered.
Commander Sandworm created the Dimension Police to protect life from villains' attacks. Perhaps you could say we serve to right wrongs in the cosmos.
I questioned her half-heartedly. Okay, so your point is those of us who upheld the Dimension Police Corps mission and fought for it didn't have a choice? I didn't have much energy for debating, but was trolling her in a way. Friendly banter.
Not anymore, we don't,
she said tenderly, which made me curious. Why? This time my question was sincere.
Because Villain changed things. He is destroying the very energy of the cosmos. He is destroying the source of life.
You know what's kind of funny? I asked, remembering something, not actually addressing what she had just said.
There is nothing funny about it, Vlad,
she replied at once in a serious tone. I had upset her.
Why would you say that?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way. But it is a little funny that you and I met in a similar situation to the one we are in right now. You, sitting in my room, trying to figure out how to help me while I was pitiful and useless, restrained to a bed. She looked at me and softened up. I had always had issues, but after what happened to me after the Zugerplexus War, when aliens invaded Earth and destroyed most of Texas and the East Coast, I'd finally broken, having been released from duty and losing everything. Ilona brought me back. She was the reason I still had a semblance of coherence in me. And I knew she disliked it when I used self-deprecation as humor. But it is funny, I quipped, teasing her. Because in the movies, it's always up to some muscle-bound hero to defeat all odds and save the world. Yet here we are. The entire universe, the entire cosmos at stake. And all you have is CW, and me.
Oh, Vlad, don't say that. I believe in you,
she said with heartfelt reassurance. Truth be told, I felt worthless about what happened recently. Do you have a choice? I smiled at her, shielding my pain behind sarcasm while taking a large swig of warm coffee. Ilona straightened up in her chair. Her loving look faded rapidly from her eyes. Shifting from caring to professional, she crossed her legs again and placed her tablet on her thigh.
Okay, smartass.
She sighed.
I see your sense of humor is coming back. This is good.
Sure. If we can't cry, we may as well laugh.
Well, concentrate on the good. Forget about Villain for a while. Get away from that dark place.
But I need to know what was inside his head. Why did he do what he did? I wondered, twirling the last of the coffee around the bottom of the cup before taking the final gulp.
Vlad, you need to find the warmth of goodness again. Seeing Villain's memory was not healthy for you. We are going to have to take small steps, or I fear you'll get sucked into his negativity and not come back to me.
Ilona, I started to say, putting the empty coffee cup on the floor.
I want you back to the way you were before any of these terrible things happened,
she said more forcefully than before.
We've been through too much to get where we are. I refuse to lose that too.
She was right, and I had no choice but to concede defeat to her. Okay then, what now?
I want you to concentrate on what happened 2 weeks ago. We need to record the events with as many details as possible. There must be clues in what CW saw and did. Maybe then we can peel it back to understand how to better defend ourselves against Villain.
I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I held it in as long as I could, and then exhaled slowly to help me transition into this new conscious state where I could surf the cosmic mind source and see memories. Laying back on the cot in my cell, I took another slow breath and felt it pulling me away and filling me with energy. I concentrated on CW, his persona, our adventures together, and his laughter. I thought about our mission that day, the walls of my cell completely disappearing, replaced by the familiar sights and sounds of our exploration craft. Out in the infinite universe, finding life was in fact rare. However, much rarer was finding planets destroyed by artificial means. Dreadfully, it had become a common occurrence, and the Dimension Police Commander had sent CW and me to investigate. We traveled around in what I always thought was a recreational vehicle of a ship, a long-term exploration shuttle, which we had spent the better part of the past 2 years in. It was ridiculous looking compared to the sleeker models, and even though it was large and well-equipped, it was as dignified as riding around in a minivan. To its credit, it was comfortable. Hopping from dimension to dimension with CW was seldom dull. Our missions were typically solitary and kept us away from the rest of the Dimension Police, so I hadn't built much rapport with the staff. The rest of the DP officers were like support characters to me, since they usually showed up to clear out or contain something CW and I had already dealt with. I suspected that even the commander hardly tolerated me, and I was fine with all of that. This last mission we were in was killing me though. It hadn't been just tedious, it had been frustrating as hell. We were in orbit around a recently scorched planet. The engines were idle as we coasted around it. Down on the planet, the smoke pillars towering from the raging infernos that ravaged its surface choked the atmosphere with ash and smoke. Fires had replaced the glow of artificial lights of the civilizations now gone, and lava oozed out of cracks on the planet's blackened surface, which added to the inhospitable chaos. CW sat next to me. He was about 7 feet tall, and every bit of his body was ripping with muscle. Unlike Villain, whose executioner hood was the symbol of fear and death, CW had a kind, perhaps even goofy-looking smile, and on top of his head, there was the symbol of goodness and hope in the Weirdiverse, a red and blue propeller beanie. He had slightly tanned skin, a robust exaggerated chin, and kind yet electric blue eyes, which at that moment were uncharacteristically sad. He silently read, as he looked through glassy eyes at the information displayed on several floating monitors. He was a person who had deep feelings, and who mourned for the loss of life at the core of his being. The cockpit had several monitors. Some were attached to the dashboard, while others floated around us, creating artificial windows and the illusion of a glass windshield. One of the monitors rendered a headshot of the most evolved species that used to inhabit the planet below us. CW held it as if it were a photograph. The other monitors scrolled statistical data and processes. I slumped, almost lying down in my chair, not trying to hide the boredom I felt. The truth is that working side by side with CW for the past 2 years had dissolved all the pretenses of politeness from me. Lately, we had investigated the destruction of 5 planets where Villain and his space armada had not just obliterated all life on them, but had made the planets permanently uninhabitable. The only clue we had been able to piece together was that Villain was attacking worlds that spawned original life, which is what we referred to as life that appeared and evolved without any cosmic sentient interference, life not created or engineered by the champions or the cherubs, but purely by chance. My task had me on the verge of an emotional breakdown due to the boredom. I really cannot overstate how bored I was. My job was to click on a button every few minutes, confirming a scan result that displayed on a small floating monitor near my head. The scan result was the same every time on every planet we had investigated. It read, "No life found." There was another smaller monitor near it, where the coordinates of the scan were displayed. Below that was one of the perks of this soccer mom spaceship, a replicating machine integrated into the cockpit console right in front of me. A small container with a straw had just finished appearing inside it. I grabbed it eagerly and took a sip but burnt myself. Ah, damn it. The machine is still making the coffee too hot, I exclaimed, smacking my tongue against the roof of my mouth to make the sharp pain go away. I turned to the small monitor with the scan data, which only served to worsen my frustration. The monitor still flashed, "No life found." "Hey, see, we've scanned every inch of this planet 3 times now, man," I said, half trying to get off the hook from doing this depressing duty, but knowing full well we were the only ones able to deal with this mess. CW smiled slightly in acknowledgement, his eyes still fixated on the monitors in front of him. He was openly sympathetic, his feeling of honest concern radiated from him, and I could feel it like a slight warmth around my chest. His voice was deep and intense but soft and comforting at the same time, a sound filled with compassion and goodness.
I know, Vlad,
he said to address my discomfort.
I apologize.
I shrunk in my seat, feeling guilty about my selfishness. Well, I said, it's not that I don't want to find life, see, but it's been the same for every planet the Space Armada has destroyed. We've scanned them for days, and we've always come up empty-handed. I looked at the scanner monitors for reassurance. They still flashed the no life found status. I want to find something, man, I do, but this, I said, agitated, tapping the scanner and grinding my teeth, this is just frustrating. CW's demeanor didn't change. He was still calm and collected as he spoke with an air of confidence. He indeed was someone who wholeheartedly believed everything comes together for good in the end.
We cannot lose hope, Vlad. The Weirdiverse needs us to be strong during this time of suffering. That is our duty.
I'm sorry, C. I am just upset at not being able to get leads on this case. Unlike CW, I was quickly overcome with negative emotions, and I wasn't concerned with public opinion or afraid to express my feelings. I knew I had a habit of ranting, and I didn't care. How is it that they get away? How are they moving so fast? And hell, we can't even get a clue, so how are we going to stop them? I wasn't expecting answers from CW. Instead, I picked up the coffee pouch to take a sip and burnt myself again. See, it's frustrating. I want to catch these idiots in the act, so we can lay down some justice on them. I need to put my boot up some ass. CW never reacted to my emotional outbursts. Ever since we became partners, CW had taken up the cause of showing me there was always a favorable outcome to every circumstance. It was something CW vehemently believed. With a lot of effort and a cheerful outlook, anything was possible. Always optimistic, CW was the battery from which hope offered its energy. The champion of order and goodness. He was the opposite of villain, in the battle for balance in the Weirdiverse. He turned his full attention to me, his eyes narrowed with concern.
Catching them in the act would mean another planet destroyed, Vlad.
His voice was soft and his tone filled with understanding.
I hope we find a way to bring these criminals to justice before that happens again. Knowing Villain is targeting planets with original life in them, the Dimension Police have placed outposts throughout the Weirdiverse. I trust our efforts will pay off soon enough to save more planets and civilizations before tragedy strikes again.
CW typed on a keypad in front of him, bringing up different faces of the ex-inhabitants of the planet below in all the monitors. He waved a hand to highlight the various beings that the Space Armada had annihilated.
It is heartbreaking to know that these are the faces that will never be seen alive again in any dimension,
he said to me, but addressing the monitors as if they were an audience too.
If we lose hope, their deaths will have been in vain. Vlad, we must concentrate and even multiply our individual efforts to find out where Villain will strike again and stop him.
I stopped my bitching and sat up a little straighter in my chair. CW's words had the power to energize me every time. Along with Ilona, CW was the ray of positivism I needed in my life. Without them, I was bound to lose my path and fall into darkness. CW was the living example of virtue, honesty, and trust. Things, I think, most humans found honorable and comforting. Things I would have sacrificed my own life for. I truly felt that sacrificing ourselves in the name of good was a common trait shared by many. It was what made life worth living. I think we humans serve as the perfect example of the internal tug-o-war for the balance of good and evil, order and chaos, many of us fighting the battle within. Whereas in the Weirdiverse, the power struggle between order and chaos between CW and Villain was external and had spanned throughout the cosmos and intertwined dimensions that would have never encountered each other. Their war threatened to tear apart the very fabric of reality. My path was the exception from the rest of humankind, as I had become part of an extraordinary journey that humans can only dream of. Living outside my own dimension, inexplicably, I wasn't just recruited into the Dimension Police but partnered with one of the most powerful beings in the cosmos. Still, memories of turmoil and confusion from back home overshadowed the excitement of my unlikely situation from time to time. Makes you wish I were a psychic, huh? I said, feeling a smile creep up on my face as I remembered the past, The beginning of my time alongside CW when I didn't understand my abilities and I would see flashes of unexplainable things. I got an illusion of grandeur and argued that I had psychic powers. It was then that Ilona and then CW stood by me against all the odds, putting up with my crazy claims. Had they not done this, I know I would have ended up in that dark hole of despair forever, useless for the rest of my life. Back then, I even had nightmares of being a suicidal drug dealer who went on a vengeful, murderous rampage. Since I wasn't the sappy kind, I dismissed these thoughts with my usual sarcastic attitude. I turned away from CW to take a sip from my coffee and burnt myself again. Seriously though, I complained. Can we go home now so I can get a decent cup of coffee? Half annoyed from burning my mouth, I tore the top of the pouch with my teeth and placed it on top of the cockpit console in front of me, hoping that would help cool it down. A loud series of warning beeps and alarms interrupted us. Broadcasts from different dimension police officers replaced the data on our monitors, and several more screens materialized from one end of the cockpit to the other. Our cockpit became a conference room for the DP officers. All sorts of species from across the cosmos had united to create the Dimension Police, and suddenly dozens of them had the dire need to speak to us. I could tell, even with their alien but humanoid facial features, the unmistakable grave looks in their expressions. The dull gray Dimension Police uniforms made them look even more solemn. One of the floating screens stood out from the rest. It was larger and placed itself in front of the others, anchoring itself between CW and me. It became the focal point for all the other monitors. A semi-translucent tardigrade-like being appeared on the screen. I straightened up self-consciously to pay attention to him, since this was Commander Sandworm, the one responsible for creating the Dimension Police and bringing Ilona and me into it.
Captain, we're diverse.
He saluted with a slight tone of relief. His voice projected out of every part of the interior of our ship and muted all the other sounds in the cockpit. CW leaned forward to acknowledge him.
Yes, sir. We hear you loud and clear.
The commander nodded at him.
The Dimension Police was attacked at the Zacharine outpost just minutes ago.
But to me he didn't sound loud and clear. He sounded hoarse and dry, crackling as if he were out of breath. It was kind of creepy how the radiance of the monitors and other lights were absorbed into the commander's skin, making him appear like a ghostly sponge. CW replied,
Was anyone hurt?
Captain, the outpost was destroyed. We did not receive any communications. Preliminary information suggests the Space Armada was responsible, but we will need to investigate.
Commander,
interrupted one of the DP officers in another monitor. There was a scroller on the bottom of the screen identifying the officers. His name was Major Skitties, and he was in the Adiran Battlefield Moon's outpost. Since the computer translated his speech for everyone to understand him, his voice was slightly modulated. Skitties desperately pounded commands on his keyboard. Smoke began to obscure his image. The sounds of the destruction around him became louder.
they've arrived.
Skitties yelled out.
We're under attack. Repeat. We are under attack.
Major Skitties,
Commander Sandworm replied.
abandon your post and retreat.
Skitties turned to speak to another monitor.
Control.
The major shouted.
Initiate defensive maneuvers and give me a visual for the commander.
Determined, he typed faster on the interfaces. An explosion shook him off his feet, but Skitties pulled himself back up, still yelling orders to others around him. He pointed at the control center and shouted,
Give me that visual.
I leaned forward, pulling out another keyboard and several control panels from the dashboard in front of me. I made a quick grab for the coffee and took another sip. It burnt me and caused me to jolt in my seat. Crap, still too hot? I grumbled, hastily placing the pouch back on top of the cockpit. I made a map of the cosmos materialize in front of us. CW, look. I pointed at the upper left edge of the map. Here is the Zacharine outpost. I zoomed the map out and pointed to the opposite side on the lower right edge. And here is the Adiran battlefield outpost where Major Skitties is. Our shuttle's location flashed on the screen just a couple of dimensions away from them. It's close to us. I slid my fingertip from the Adiran battlefield outpost to the Zacharine outpost and drew a trajectory path. The display automatically calculated the distance and time of travel on the upper right corner of the map. The computer estimated it would take about an hour to travel that distance. The Space Armada shouldn't have the technology to travel from Zakharine to Adiran battlefield this fast, I noted. They must be split up. How else could they have attacked two outposts back-to-back like this?
Commander,
CW said.
We will go to the Adiran battlefield outpost right now.
And without waiting for a response, CW started to input commands into the ship's controls.
Since the Space Armada knows the location of our outpost,
CW continued,
I suggest the Dimension Police abandon all locations and rally elsewhere while we assess the situation. We will neutralize the Space Armada.
The commander was addressing other monitor screens and officers surrounding him when CW spoke, but he returned his attention to us without skipping a beat.
Agreed.
The commander answered.
We will follow your lead, Captain. May you bring peace and order to the cosmos. All units, rendezvous at my location now and prepare to provide Captain Weirdiver's aid with rescue efforts.
Sir,
Skitties suddenly interjected.
we have a visual.
His screen flickered and showed a blurry glimpse of the Space Armada through a hole in the roof, covering the sky above him. However, his screen went into blank static as a bombardment of plasma bolts and projectiles destroyed the camera.
Commander. Captain. There are about 100 ships over us.
Major Skitty's voice surprisingly panted through the static.
They have breached our defenses. We are under direct attack. They have dimmed.
Another series of explosions interrupted him, and then there was only silence.
No.
CW's reaction was instantaneous. He felt a sudden loss of life. His eyes voiced the pain within. CW's spark of optimism ignited, and even as the rest of us came to the crushing realization of Major Skitty's demise, he did not pause in his intent to save the officers in need.
Vlad, prepare for quantum space travel,
CW said, but he caught me off guard. It took me a second to recuperate, since I was still trying to process the death of our fellow officers. Then I reacted, still dumbfounded, and shuffled with the cockpit controls to move the large map in front of the commander's face. Our trajectory to the outpost appeared on the map, as well as the other Dimension Police spaceships and their locations. The Adiran battlefield moon's outpost marker began to fade as the Space Armada completed its destruction.
3, 2.
CW counted down when hysteria overtook me. Oh no. Wait. But it was too late. CW had already pushed the button. My coffee, I screamed as our ship zipped into quantum space, the searing coffee spilling all over my lap.